Running at 2 hours and 43 minutes long, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is the 7th film in the long franchise with Tom Cruise running. Is this worth your time? Is it as good as Fallout or perhaps better? This is a non-spoiler review, let's jump in. Ethan Hunt and his IMF team must track down a dangerous weapon before it falls into the wrong hands. Once again, Christopher McQuarrie is directing. Lorne Balfe returns with an immaculate score in my mind. I thought this was the best score from him. Certain emotional cues are on top form. There are just moments in this that I wasn't expecting. The action is what you expect it to be. Tom Cruise doing stunts in camera. Christopher McQuarrie doing big epic scenes in camera. For the most part, everything that you see is practical effects. Often you will look at something going, how did they do that in camera? But for the most part, that is in camera. I was talking with my friend who I went and saw this in the London screening. Great cinema, Odeon in Leicester Square, huge sound. And I would say that one of the best, apart from the score, one of the best things about this film is the sound effects. If you can go to a cinema with the biggest screen with the best sound system possible, I would highly recommend it, because it's not loud for the sake of being loud. It's loud in places where you feel it, where you feel the reverberations through the seats. And that goes hand in hand with the score building up to those emotional beats that I was surprised at how many there were in here. Because it's a new story, it's kind of harking back to the original Mission Impossible, very Hitchcockian in that way.
Abort, that's an order.
An amazingly grounded story and very realistic for the now. So it's very prominent as to what's happening in the world. It's as if they could see in the future when writing this script what they needed to do in order to make it relevant for everybody to watch now. And that's what we get in this story. So in amongst the crazy, spectacular action sequences which nobody should be able to complete except Ethan Hunt and his team, because they are the people that are called to do the Mission Impossible should you choose to accept it, you kind of put that disbelievability off to a side by now because you've been with the team for so long. So Tom Cruise does an amazing job once again at portraying a very conflicted man who often goes rogue because he sees the bigger picture and he knows what he needs to do in order to complete the mission. But we've now gotten to a place where he really cares about his team. He'll always put himself in the front of danger. Before himself, he'll protect everybody else, and that's a big theme here. The balance of saving the world or saving the one on his team. I like that because it shows more emotionality, shows a real human perspective of our super agents, and that's what we get here. So in amongst the big action set pieces that you've come to expect, you can look at other films like The Fast and Furious, where even in the Rome sequence with the big ball, smashing everything up, you can see how much CG they use that. Compare that to this practical with the same shots in the same places, almost mimicking that, but practical. You see the difference in the tension, the realization of how much more you are holding your breath. There's a large majority of this film that I expect a lot of people to be holding their breath for. In fact, you need to remember to need to breathe. I watched Mission Impossible 1 and the rest, but I would say in prep for this, you don't need to watch all of them. The first one, definitely, because there's a storyline that kind of harks back to Ethan's origin. So watch that first one, which is great if you'd want to do some preparation. And then number 7, there's a little bit of knowing the characters beforehand and a kind of nod to what's happened before, everything that's come before. If you wanted to go into this completely fresh, not having seen any of the previous missions, that would have been fine, because you will get to know the characters. They just won't be that emotional gut punches to when something happens to some of your characters, because you haven't gone on those adventure journeys with them. For me, I felt it properly in a certain sequence that was keeping being like heightened because of the crescendo of the score building and building, because of the action building to a climactic moment. And I just went, no, not that person, anybody but that person. Which I thought was amazing, because one of the things that Stephen King always says is kill your darlings. And the reason why you do that is because you hook the characters. But I don't always want my darlings to be killed. I want them to live, damn it. Hasn't Ethan and his team gone through enough? And talking about his team, Simon Pegg, for the screen time that he gets in here, there's comedy dialogue and moments between Tom Cruise and Simon Pegg that I think the banter that has always worked, but they hit the cues perfectly. The comedic timing moments is excellent, and it doesn't detract from the film. So what you're getting is comedy at the right moments, and then you're getting levity moments to release some of the tension that is just basically consistent. You have some downtime, and I think some people will feel the time. Definitely have a wee break like before you go and watch this film. But I think for the most part, I like the downtime because it gave us a chance to breathe, bring some of that levity, building the characters, which just spends a lot of time. Because essentially this film is a setup for the climactic action, which I think is going to be the second part. And even though it is a setup, it feels very much like the Dark Knight of Mission Impossibles. And what I mean by that is Christopher McQuarrie loves the Dark Knight. He loves Nolan, and I think mostly everybody, but there are moments in this that you could reflect, some narration happening over the film where you could reflect on what the film is carrying over. Definitely a nod towards, or a hug, or a not a copying, but a similarity to what I want to bring to it. So there's a Christopher Nolan-esque Dark Knight character, not the hero we need, but the one we deserve. That is a definite theme throughout this, which I liked. And because it deals with the real world consequences of something that's happening in the world to us now, the reflection of that feels very real when you're seeing it happen to characters on screen. So many times we've had this theme used in films that is not used correctly, or used and it comes across cheesy. This time it doesn't feel like that. It just feels hard-hitting and definitely worth watching. You are, like I said, forgetting to breathe. Now, whether this is better than Fallout, I would say for me at the moment, I think it is. Even though in Fallout there are moments that will stick in my mind where I hear Henry Cavill's muscles, you know, cranking up as he's about to do the gun movements. And there are action sequences that made me hold my breath. But in this one, because of everything that has happened before, when there are action sequences and it happens to our characters, it hurts more. It feels like the consequences are so much higher, even though there's always been real world, you know, events that might destroy the world, and they're saving not just one place but the Earth. This time the consequences feel so much bigger. And I think that's a clever writing story dynamic, even though this is only part 1. So I would say if you were waiting maybe to go and watch part 1 and 2 together, and you thought, I don't need to watch them now, definitely watch this one on the biggest, loudest screen possible, especially as it has a complete story. Now what I mean by that is there's definitely part 2 coming, and you know what they're going to be talking about and what the story is going to be about in part 2. But there's a nice conclusion to a certain story event. So we have a story that's done and dusted, and then the next part is clear. Rather than leaving us like mid-action sequence like Fast and Furious, or even some of the Netflix series we have recently where they leave us like mid-punch, mid-knife, like Witcher, you know. None of that. There's a clear, concise story that leaves you feeling satisfied and entertained, but very excited for the next movie. So I would say that this is a strong 4.5 Nicolas Cages out of 5.
And you got one. Congratulations.
The only reason I haven't given it 5 is because I thought it was slightly long. There was some down moments, but I didn't mind those, and as well as I'm not sure how good it will be in reflection to the second part. It may even go back up to a 5 if the next part is good. So let me know your thoughts and feelings. Are you going to go see this? What is your favorite Mission Impossible movie in the franchise, and how would you rank them? It's a difficult one. Thanks so much for watching, but most of all, until next time, remember, live long and Tuesday.